Do we have any other questions? I see one person has their hand raised in
Oh, sorry, I
the
can't see that.
participant panel, but I'm not actually sure that participants can voice their questions. They might have to type them into the Q&A.
I'm going to try. I'm going to click allow to talk and see what happens. So here we go. Carmela, can you hear us?
Oh,
I think you
Carmela,
need
it looks like you're
to
muted.
be unmuted. Yeah.
I'm unmuting.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay,
Yay.
great. Wonderful talk, Emily, and I also enjoyed the questions. Yes, great talk. But my question is relates to some of the things you said here, and I'll try to put them all together. First of all, the parchment, which means long life. And the decorations, which also mean an investment in the future. And I'm reminded of the late nunnish material that we also have, the Beneventan. The Beneventan material from, that piece that we have from a convent, I believe, later.
Yeah, 16th century, but later, I think.
Yeah, but not that much. And where Virginia Brown, who had studied then the papers and the archives of this Neapolitan convent, pointed out that this material, which used this old-fashioned script and mixed, of course, with later versions, and also the language. She argued that it signified the nuns' resistance to the incursions in monastic life and monastic regime by the bishop, and in the wake of Trent, and also the great reforms that had been already undertaken of Benedictines in the 15th and the 16th century to reform these places. And so I wonder if, since you mentioned that this comes at a crucial point where these old Benedictine nuns are now faced with this new Augustinian, that it might be, could it be a kind of preservation of their old customs? I mean, it's, until we know what the contents really are like, and we can put this book in relation to monastic observance during this time, before this time. We cannot speculate, but it would be intriguing if, and particularly that they are noble women who would certainly feel entitled and attached to their tradition, because they probably had ancestors who had established or endowed. And so that's just my idea, my suggestion. I wonder if you have any thoughts on that. I spoke too long, so
No, thank you so much, Carmela. And I think that's a really, really interesting question to consider here. And I mean, I think it would be particularly interesting if we were able to uncover, as I think Susan had mentioned, other manuscripts that were being made for the use of this community, to kind of get a sense of, kind of whether there are any sorts of kind of callbacks in this manuscript to what we see being used by the nuns, possibly even, worked on by the nuns during the time that they were part of a Benedictine convent rather than an Augustinian one. I mean, if this is illuminated by a nun or multiple nuns, in that case, I do think it's quite interesting that there is so much emphasis on the nuns being both very, very clearly marked as Augustinian nuns, even at this very early date, when I would imagine there would be quite a lot of kind of conflict if these two communities were being blended together. And yet we see them here being represented as quite uniform and obedient. So I do think that's a really interesting question to consider alongside the question of whether women in this house had produced this illumination. And as for the fact that they're using parchment, I mean, I think, well, first of all, parchment takes illumination much better than paper does. So it does make some practical sense that parchment is being used to produce such a beautifully illuminated book. But that itself kind of highlights the significance of the fact that this book was made to be such a luxurious manuscript. And I think that probably does have something to do with the fact that this seems to be the first copy of statutes that this convent would have been referring to after the change from Benedictine to Augustinian. So, you know, they're really kind of enshrining this rule for themselves in a really fine physical form. But yeah, I mean, I think there could be some tension here, and I do hope that we can find some other manuscripts to look at this alongside eventually.
Thank you so much, Emily. If you'll indulge me with one last question, I just want to say that you've laid out so many interesting details about the physical object as well as its place in intellectual history. And I think you've highlighted a lot of avenues of research in order to entice people into the library to use it themselves. I just wonder if you could say a couple words on what it's like to buy a manuscript like this and bring it into the RBML. And if you can just kind of illuminate that process, since part of your talk is about this being a new acquisition.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that question, Lena. This actually calls back a little bit to Carmela's remarks, because one of the things that I was definitely thinking a lot about when I was sort of drawn to this manuscript, which I was able to actually see in person right before lockdown, like literally right before lockdown. So that was part of, you know, kind of what also kind of brought it to life for me. But one of the things I was thinking about was the fact that we do have these other books associated with Italian nuns in the 16th century in our collection already. The Beneventan prayer book that Carmela has just mentioned, and of course the Collectar produced in a convent, a Dominican convent by Angela Rucellai, which I showed the colophon from. And so, you know, I feel as though this is contributing perhaps to a kind of growing nexus of texts and of manuscripts that the collection already has, and kind of contributing to conversations we might be having about life in Italian convents in the 16th century. So that was definitely one thing that got me really excited about this book. And of course, I think the fact that there is so much work that can be done with it, coming at it from a number of different angles is always a big attraction to me. Discovering that this is a text that doesn't exist in any sort of edited or published form means that there are just a lot of different kinds of work that students and visiting researchers and faculty can be doing with it right off the bat. And also I'm very interested in building on the collection's sort of splendid illuminations in various contexts as well. So, you know, this is a very different kind of decoration than we find in, you know, the Phoenix Hours that I was showing, where we're seeing something that's very, very sort of professionally done. But I think it kind of adds to conversations that can be had about decorative practice in our manuscripts here. So those are just a few of the things I was thinking about. I could probably talk a lot longer about that, but I don't want to keep you since you've already joined so late on a Monday.
Well, you had me at lace as a border, so I look forward to seeing this in person. Thank you, Emily, and thank you everyone for coming this afternoon, and I hope to see you back in a month. Take care.